Hi, my name is Modesto Amador and I identify as a Hispanic male. I've been playing video games for as long as I can remember, but something has always stood out to me. There aren't many video game characters that look like me. In fact, I could only think of one character before doing some research on more characters, and that character is Dominic Santiago from the Gears of War series. I'll talk more about Dom later, but I spoke to a couple friends about this observation that I had, and I thought it was just me playing enough. I wasn't playing enough genres of video games to discover amazing Hispanic characters, but I was wrong. My friends scratched their heads and we sat in silence for maybe 1 or 2 minutes until we carried on with our conversation. But later that day I got home and I researched on my own about Hispanic representation in video games, and this video is just me talking about my findings in this video. Fighting games. I'm not very good at fighting games, except Mortal Kombat. I will gladly accept any 1v1, but I tend to spend my playtime in other genres, so I wasn't aware of the huge problem fighting games have with Hispanic characters. Almost all Hispanic characters in these games are stereotypical Mexican wrestlers, aka luchadores. A couple of these examples are King from Taken, El Fuerte in Street Fighter 4, El Stingray in Saturday Night Slam Masters, El Blaze in Virtua Fighter 5. And then there's two good characters that I really liked, but they're not overly stereotyped, but they're from Brazil, which isn't considered to fit into Hispanic or Latino umbrella term, and this has been a common debate, but I felt that it was necessary to include them. These characters are Eddie Gordo from Tekken and Sean Matsuda in Street Fighter 5. Both characters' ethnicities are often ambiguous, but I was able to dig and find out that they're both Afro-Brazilian. Then there's two characters that I don't really identify with them, and I don't consider them Hispanic. There's Blanca from Street Fighter 2, which is more like a beast than a man, and there's Vega from Street Fighter 2, which is this masked Spanish ninja, as they say. He's from Spain and he's very light skinned, so it's very hard to identify with him as a brown Hispanic male. So those were all the characters that I found to have a Hispanic bio or coming from Hispanic descent, and as you can see, most of them are very similar. They're all just luchadores, and then if you really want to expand, then there's some other characters like Blanca, but I really have a hard time identifying with any of these characters. Playable characters. So besides fighting games, are there really any Hispanic video game characters that you can play as? I mentioned Dominic Santiago from the Gears of War franchise earlier, but although it's possible to play as Dom, it is only possible if you're the second player. I played through the series alone and had to witness Dom through the eyes of Marcus Phoenix, the game's protagonist. While I was researching, I came across a study by a USC professor by the name of Dimitri Williams. This study was titled The Virtual Census Representations of Gender, Race, and Age in Video Games. I was astonished to find that in 2009, 3% of video game characters were actually recognized as Latino, and of that 3%, less than 5% were actually playable. That was an astonishing number. Now that was over a decade ago. We're in 2019. Surely there has to be more video game characters, right? Yeah, no, there aren't that many still. In a video titled Why We Need More Hispanic Heroes in Video Games by Matador Philip, this came out in 2 years ago, he explains how in the past decade there has been only 7 video game series with a playable Hispanic character. And of those 7 games, only 3 of those games feature that Hispanic character as the main protagonist and not an optional side character. He then goes on to show a list of 15 games that feature Hispanic villains. Most of these villains are also drug lords and gangsters, which enforces a harmful stereotype about Hispanic men. The only gaming franchise that is still alive and features a Hispanic protagonist is Just Cause, with its protagonist Rico Rodriguez. Hispanic developers. In a Kotaku article published in 2009, they mentioned that according to an International Game Developers Association, they had surveyed their membership and only 2.5% of developers were Hispanic. Now this is an extremely low number, but that would explain the small amount of Hispanic characters represented in the video game industry at the time. but as I just explained, the number of Hispanic video game characters really hasn't went up since then. So what about the amount of Hispanic developers in the industry? This is where a glimmer of hope comes. While I was researching for this video, I found out that in 2015, during Hispanic Heritage Month, there was a website known as Game Dev Latinos, and this website shed light on gaming in Hispanic regions such as Argentina, Bolivia, Cuba, Chile, Guatemala, Mexico, and so much more. This website also acted as a beacon for Hispanic developers to join the industry and not feel so lonely by showing other Hispanics already within the industry. Most of these games are made by indie developers, but as we all know, that doesn't mean that these games don't have a voice. I just think that they're not getting enough exposure and support that they need. But I think with enough support and exposure, I'm sure we'll see an increase of Hispanic representation in video games. Advertisement. The gaming industry has also tended to not advertise towards Hispanics either. I understand as a business model, most companies want to appeal to the most people as possible. But if you look at any Nintendo console ad, you're met with a Caucasian family playing in the living room, or something along those lines. Microsoft usually advertises their consoles by showing off its power or features of the console rather than the players, so then it feels more inclusive that way. I thought I'd mention this because there is a huge demographic of Hispanics who play video games. According to HispanicGamers.com, 9 in 10 Hispanic adults have played video games in the past year. Also, on average, Hispanics play video games more often than non-Hispanics, around 3 hours per week more. There are tons of more statistics on Hispanic gamers, but you get the point. There is an untapped market that the industry isn't appealing to, and I think if the industry were to recognize this, we'd see a lot more brown faces as characters we play as. Finally, I wanted to close on the detail that I've been avoiding. I didn't talk about Guacamelee because the game was specifically made to celebrate Mexican culture, and that was phenomenal. I really tried to make the point that in regular games made by AAA companies, there is a lack of Hispanic representation, and therefore many people like me struggle to find characters to identify with. What Guacamelee did was amazing, but I would like to see more brown faces in just regular games I play. Any Call of Duty or any new RPG that comes out. If there's a Hispanic character that I could play as, that'd be amazing. I just want more representation.